Oh, yeah. This meeting is being recorded. Wow, it's nice to see so many people here. I seriously doubt that when David Kluhl started the Visiting Writer Series back during the Reagan administration, that he ever imagined that we'd be doing one of these readings through our computer screens during the dying days of a Donald Trump administration. Nevertheless, right, we persisted. Here we are coming together to celebrate again, as we do, the beauty and the power of the written word. We're going to hear some beautiful and powerful words from our two wonderful poets in just a minute, but there's another wonderful poet serving as our host for this afternoon's event, our visiting assistant professor of poetry, Jonah Mixon Webster. Jonah is the author of Stereotype, which won the Sawtooth Prize, the Penn Joyce Osterweil Award for a first book, and was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Awards in 2019. Stereotype will be republished in 2021 in a new and expanded edition by Knopf and Penguin UK, two of the most prestigious publishing houses in the world. Jonah is the youngest winner ever of the Yale University Wyndham Campbell Fellowship in Poetry, among numerous other awards and honors. And it is my honor to hand it over to him. Let's do whatever we do to applaud or thumb emoji somebody over Zoom, because Jonah's put together a really nice event for us this afternoon. Jonah, over to you, my friend.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, cool. Thank you everybody for coming out. Wow, we got a lot of folks in here, especially for it being, kind of short notice. Thank you all for making time today. Thank you, Murray, for the introduction. I really want the focus and attention, though, to be on these two most virtuosic poets and artists, creators, people I've ever met in my entire life. As a poet, I have been just endlessly influenced and endlessly inspired by not only the poetry and the works of these two poets, but also just their personalities, their spirits, their minds, their intellects. We don't have that many poets who are as generous with their time and their energies in themselves as we would like to. We just don't. Poetry doesn't work like that too much anymore, or maybe it never has, as far as the people are concerned. But these two poets, however, completely contradict that trend. These two poets are just giving of themselves in more ways than one. They're giving of themselves in their work in more ways than one. Completely honored to be able to call them not only just colleagues, comrades, but also family too. So I'm going to introduce our first reader tonight. Somali-born poet and essayist Ladan Osman is the author of Exiles of Eden, a work of poetry, photos, and experimental text. The Kitchen Dweller's Testimony, University of Nebraska Press 2015, the winner of the Sillerman First Book Prize, and the chapbook Ordinary Heaven, which appeared in the box set 7 New Generation African Poets. Osman has received fellowships from the Fine Arts Work Center, Cave Canem, Luminarts Foundation, and the Mishner Center for Writers, among numerous other nominations. Please, everybody, welcome Ladan Osman. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. I don't know how it is near y'all, but it's kind of dreary over here, and soon the sun will set and we'll be plunged into the night again, which has its benefits anyway. So I just wanted to do a reading that's a little milder, a little softer, and one that looks at loneliness and transit and how we move around in spaces as a result of loneliness and as a result of need, as a result of abandonment from the state, and sometimes from, our own community, sometimes from humanity, sometimes from a single beloved. And those are, some of the main themes. I'm sure some of you are familiar with Exiles of Eden, but yeah, I was wondering how to think about that in a more bodily way, in a way that's a little bit more juicy, because I don't know how y'all are doing, even though, I feel okay and grateful in many ways. It's tough to not, share tea with our friends and beloveds and sit with our sisters and be able to read closely to each other, and that some of the best images that we have of communion are at least temporarily tainted by, fear, or worry, or even in some cases, I'm sure people in this room, from experience, in our own bodies, in our own families. And I think poetry is a great tool for rejecting that. So just gonna do a couple of poems from Exiles and then maybe one from Kitchen Dweller's Testimony. Catastrophic breakdown. The skin of every man horsewoman has ever loved tastes like olives when she licks him, like the sea thereafter. There is nothing but the sea in the air. There is nothing but the spice that surrounds the sea in the air. She is fully oriented to it. There is no speed except her fullest. She goes without hesitation. She goes without food. She goes without intention. She goes with her nostrils and eyes rimmed with her drying water, white, the horizon and sun, white, the land mostly white. She, black everywhere except the whites of her eyes, which flare against exhaustion. She goes with her ears and the iron in her hooves pointed to some shore. No distinction between the wind that enters, leaves her. All the air is warm. The sea smells warm. There is nothing but the sea. She goes in a land that is all salt, salty marshes, later white sands that may be salt. She goes with salt wearing her hooves. She is still at the shore. The water maintains a boundary. She has salt in her heart, tastes it, feels it pour out of her, must her flank, her riven and riven and riven heart, mended again and again with her distilled desire for the sea. She finds some figure there, indistinct from the water, and becomes indistinct from the scene, her water or blood or the seawater indistinct from each other, her riven and riven and riven heart, raw from mending and desire, recognizes its ability to break. This breaks her legs. She kneels to the sea, not to the figure, not yet. The sea draws close enough to put her forelock between its lips, and she says to the figure there, I submit to the sum and sea of you. Haven't you always had me by my forelock? And so this is also from Exiles. And this is interesting because there's a straight line wind in, maybe that's why I just want to read it. It wasn't super conscious decision, but there's a straight line winds in New York yesterday, which sometimes can feel or look like, like weaker tornado winds to people. And it was just something a bit surreal seeing that, maybe like blowing through Midtown or something on people's videos. And many of the poems, despite, there are all these other things that we're thinking about, but it's always in the context or under the ceiling or something, which seems to be getting more and more constricted, of climate change and the hazards and heartbreak of that. But then also probably all my poems are just a deep belief in the earth and everything that it gives to us. So even when it's terrifying or destructive, there's still such important lessons, such important parables, and such important poetry in them. So this is The Sea Fell on My House. I was sweeping and counting my cups and rinsing my toothbrush and bracing my hinges when the sea fell on my house. The sea fell on my house when I'd braced for a straight line wind. The sea fell on my house and I couldn't tell if it jumped on me or me and it, but I was filled with the minerals and matter every beast and root on earth contain. I couldn't tell if it jumped in me or me in it, but I watched it fall out of my body, warm seawater from my body onto the kitchen floor. I'd just checked for the earth dust of winter, the brown dust of winter. When you enter with it, don't say may, say can. Can I? And I'll answer with a gesture, cover me with your body in that atmosphere between our ribs, rain. Rain containing the minerals and salve for every beast and root on earth. Cover me and cover my cries, my mouth a cave for the sea to rush through, your tongue some urchin assigned to live off my minerals and matter. Later, when delinquent, refuse to move, your belly at rest, your belly a palm on my belly. Refuse to move until another train passes, and I'll say no with a gesture. The sea fell on my house. The sky was paper white, just afternoon, an exact white. Winter salt crests and froth on the sidewalks. That should have been a warning that the sea would fall. The real one, not the sad sea of a snow mound resisting spring. The real one fell on my house. I couldn't tell if pressure was at the front of my mind or if my mind got stopped up underwater. The sea fell, the sea fell, the sea fell on me, and I'm at ease and thirsty, and a figure is made known, a figure made from all the minerals and matter of his fellow beasts. The roots he eats, we are thirsty and at ease, and falling asleep to the mineral scent of our contribution to the sea. We are thirsty and at ease, and the chalk and film of the sea is dry on our thighs and fingers, and in the juvenile curve under our lips. We are thirsty and at ease. We are thirsty and at ease. We are thirsty and at ease. We are thirsty and at ease, and mindful of our salt, and thirsty and at ease, and resting, and assured of the yield we'll mine. If you're curious, this is tea with coconut milk in it. It's a very wholesome and comforting feeling. Please excuse the sound of the trucks and buses just like zooming down this neighborhood street. I'm like, obviously y'all don't care about the children. That was just a school bus zooming like that. So I think I'll just do this poem. And this is one that I wrote. I actually couldn't have wrote it without Maxwell's Pretty Wings. I just listened to it on repeat to finish the poem, but it was at a time where you could sense some of the things that we're grappling with now, all the bad storytelling, all the convoluted myths, all the destruction, all the abuse of people who have already taken so much abuse was really, you know, in 2012, 13, 14, the time that I was just kind of finishing up this poem and figuring out how to arrange it. You could see that building and spilling into everything, into conversations, into dreams. And I wanted to be able to break through from that, like the situational depression of that. I wanted to be able to see myself out of it. And so this poem helped me to do that. And it's also the last poem in the Kitchen Dweller's Testimony. I also understood that the book was finished and that I had to like step into myself and just become better and more brave and more ready to meet the days that were coming. And so I think it's good to return to it now. Western Gate. They say women's dreams stay indoors. These days I dream an ocean under the bed. I wake up and watch its tide. I'm myself, but also a large black bird like the crows near oceans. I sit up in bed. I perch on the concrete sill. I'm big enough to slap pavement upon impact, take running steps to land. I shout for myself to fly, but only look back at myself and the water rises, so the whole room smells like salted water and soaked beans. Have you ever tried to walk when the water recedes, leaving a chainmail pattern in the sand, feet sinking? Have you ever tried to walk, watching the water move and fallen right into it? The sinking woman will try to make waves a column, its froth a steady handhold. I've been having a problem with my eyes. I keep thinking they'll get paper cuts. I squint and reveal floaters on every surface. I could never see past what's right in front of me and dislike the whole house if it has broken blinds. I can't ignore the shapes floating past my retina. I can't submit. I align them for inspection. The runs in my humor, clogged pipe, jellyfish, the Titanic, they grow with each pass. Look beyond them, my father would say, when he'd catch me squinting into the light, the other eye wide and rolling, flicking madly to catch any figure. One night, a black spider in my pillowcase. God sent me here to protect you. Okay, I said, come on in. Who are you talking to? My husband asked. I told him a spider with the most beautiful voice would be sleeping with us from now on. From time to time, I would see her outside, dangling at the window, her large abdomen gleaming. At dusk, a katydid at ear level, trilling like a transformer. Every sunset, pray, 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 in currents that grate my heart. But I can't always do it. I hide from it, from the windows. Is there a shadow in the dust? Is there some depression in the dust? Someone please track the visitant whose entrance implies a new dimension. It's as odd as a cat standing before you, watching you pray, claws at your forehead, or pouring skin temperature water over yourself and wondering, have I dressed in unseen garments? Or scripture playing to an empty room. How long will my second self jump up and go for the first exit? After a season of night terrors, leaves, feathers, lapping water, men with light, then torsos of light, a large bird appeared on the sill. It was bigger than all the others. What do you want? Should I die so you can take this bed? It looked sad and faced westwards, eyes jaundiced, so I sat up and told it to leave, leave. I flapped my wrists. It turned from me, facing west. A breeze lifted a collar of feathers. I was again it, myself. By then, I was ready to go crazy, lay my head on the bottom of a tub filled with my crazy. And then it flew away, and the torsos and ocean went with it, and I was myself again and peaceful with my three shadows when walking in any new night. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Ladan. I appreciate it. Yes, please, you can go ahead and send some applauses over in the chat if you hit that little hand clap emoji at the top there. Thank you so much. Oh, wow. Whew. All right. Let's keep it going. Sorry, I didn't know you were gonna stop there. That was all right. Airea D. Matthews is the author of Simulacra, winner of the 2016 Yale Series of Younger Poets, and a 2020 Pew Fellow. Her work has appeared in Callaloo, Best American Poets, Harvard Review, American Poet, Los Angeles Review of Books, Tin House, and elsewhere. She is an assistant professor at Bryn Mawr College and is working on her second book, Mundane Gods. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. This was so far just a lovely event. Thank you, Ladan, for your words. They were beautiful poems. I'm going to share poems, not from Simulacra today, but from my new project, Mundane Gods, which is essentially me trying to make sense of the idea of commodification and disposability. I think about those things quite a bit, and I think about how they, in late stage capitalism, a person becomes a commodity, something that one can dispose of and be replaced, and or how emotions can be commodified. Entire groups of people can be commodified. But more than that, I start thinking about the working class and the middle class and the great erasures of their histories and contributions throughout time, primarily because history is written by the victors, and often victors have fat pockets. So I'm thinking of my past, present, future. This first poem is from the collection, and it's basically a palimpsest, which is a redacted historical text of Adam Smith's magnum opus, which is The Wealth of Nations, which is the fundamental text that formed capitalism as we know it. Chapter 4, Origin and Use. Every man becomes a certain commodity. The former, the butcher, the brewer, the baker, the bread. Legacy. And then there are those who, in the words of artist Mendel Black, inherit rebellion. Large lots of unbeing passed down one generation to the next. Absent value on the free market, nothing gets resolved. Too many other worries anyhow. The who, what, when, why, where of basic living. Simple names are expensive. It costs too much to be pronounced. Best yet, to curl under the weight of obscurity, put on the full armor of mundane gods who see fit to have their heirs waste away among brothers fattened from lamb. I think my headphones are going out, so I'm going to go ahead and change to the. Can you hear me? Okay. Etymology. Because my mother named me after a child born godmother.
Sounds like I think it's something is shaking around the mic or something.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I think, yeah.
Because my mother named me after a child born still to a godmother I've never met, I took another way to be known. Something easier to remember, inevitable to forget, something that rolls over the surface of thrush, because I grew tired of saying, no, it's pronounced. Now I'm tired of not conjuring that ghost I honor. Say it with me. Airea. Rhymes with Sarah. Sarah from the Latin meaning a woman of high rank, which also means whenever I ask anyone to hold me in their mouth, I sound like what I almost am. Hear me out. I'm not a D or a river charging through working class towns where union folk cog wedge for plots and barely any house at all, where bosses mangle ethnic phonemes and nobody says one word because checks in the mail. So let's end this classist pretend where names don't matter and language is too heavy a lift. My E is silent, like most people should be. The consonant is sonorant, is a Black woman, or one might say the spine. I translate to wind in a country known for its iron, imply lioness of God in Jesus's tongue, mean apex predator, free of known enemy, fierce enough to harm or fast enough to run, but full able to know. The tongue has no wings to flee what syllables it fears. The mouth is no womb, has no right to consume what it did not make. Migrant sonnet. Here I am somebody to the vine, even if only a strange tender. May I tell you all the ways plants put men to shame. These blackberries under my nail don't ripen pity or disgust. These stalks don't shirk should I graze their shoulder. Would you even believe when I speak our mother's song, the stems nod their heads, not because they know our lyrics, not even because they understand. Rather, they too have tongues. 9 a.m. working class bedtime story. Every morning, 2 hours after the gate closed on her night shift, a woman in a gown wiped oil from ladder rungs, sharpened 2 hatchets with a dull whetstone, and steadily climbed through tropospheres to reach the ridge of her roof. Positioned just so, legs Kennebeau, arms dual wielding, she'd cut the sun from its cosmic string, watch it gyrate in midair, light, don't go nowhere easy. Take swing after swing until the axe head flew and the sun dimmed and fell through that roof onto a parlor floor where that woman collapsed, sheerly done in, while her curious youngin', with my feral stare, sat quietly in the dark corner chair, picking flint flakes of ash from her nappy ass hair. On division of labor. After she died, her lips moved as if praying. It takes several seconds for the brain to know it is no longer needed. Fridays outside the unemployment office, unobserved bodies revolved in and out of the doors. She left with the same papers she came, saying the same words. No work this week, come back next week for. American Ouroboros. This is a contrapuntal, so it's 3 poems in one. My circle unsettles to write about being an imaginary, a mandala gone wrong, not a flag-draped snake, an absurd spectacle watching an infinite idea unraveling. But nobody speaks of a slithering country driven to madness. This explains how wildfires start with a poor man begging for holy heat while his cruel lover strikes a match. And it's nothing new now, is it? Supposed to be that other symbol, consuming its own tail. All these souls worship a misconstrued myth recoiling as the American way, wheeled by cognitive error and one burning rhetorical question. America, how do we keep warm in a room slowly filling with gas? My circle unsettles and it's nothing new to write about now, is it? Being an imaginary, supposed to be a mandala gone wrong, not that the other symbol, not a flag-draped snake consuming its own tail, an absurd spectacle watching. All these souls worship an infinite idea unraveling, a misconstrued myth recoiling, but nobody speaks of a slithering as the American way. Country driven to madness, wheeled by cognitive error, and this explains how wildfires start with one burning rhetorical question. A poor man begging for holy heat. America, how do we keep warm while his cruel lover strikes a match in a room slowly filling with gas? I've got a few more. This is called Parochial Word Problem for the Apocalypse. If the days pass as others before, and time stills near black holes' horizons, and all born to a trumpet are tweeting about cow tipping in Iceland, and aliens exist at 3 p.m. but use a midnight god shield so you can't see them, and someone on a hilltop has a ruinous cry surrounded by assault of locusts, and if, due north, barefoot titans die at the sorry edge of regret, and perhaps, having said penance, a shadow unrooshes and winnows sorrow infinitely, and pilgrims brood and brutes thresh, and summer is the opposite of swelter, and iced coffee undulates in a brawl cup, and 2 parts dust to 1 part luster pinks up right nice, and gussied up doves are sold higher than peace costs, and mercy ghosts my forearm with a touch when it feels like it, and soul sick is just longing and drag, and all who sleep aren't well or full, and for 2 pennies more, a half-coated avatar will suck dry your saltwater bread, tease your left nipple with a rat tail comb, and aren't you excited now? Yes, aren't you excited? And don't you want it now? Don't you want it? And don't you want this catastrophe to come harder? And don't you want this catastrophe to come inside you? And if so, what time will little Noah thread a camel through a needle and make it rain? We was kings. Been trying to show you history don't change much. There's hard proof erasure repeats. What we learn to accept are tidy myths full of men who look unlike me. Still people, but not me or my uncle who would share stories about a line of Black kings in Scotland. How in 948, Dub the Black, son of Malcolm, was called vehement nigger. Dub was oft in the field by his cousin Colin next in line. How Cuz was murked by Dub's brother Kenneth, who looked a lot like Obama if Obama lived in Kirkcaldy in the late 900s. Even then, brothers wilded out in a country that found it suitable to call their kings niggas. This went on until every mud-tongued fisher of sweet bone bread ground to chalk, until the new kings with lighter eyes and narrow features commissioned portraits in which every past heir had a porcelain face. Only the backgrounds had any dark. All those kings who looked like me, waiting as muted novas in a celestial sea of utter blankness. A couple more, then I'll take my leave. So I think about how these are utterly confusing times, and times in which you don't know how to focus your attention. We're always thinking about one thing and doing another, or doing one thing and thinking of something else. There's never a sense, there's not a sense of presence, and how stolen time, that's how it can be thieved from us, how that thieving affects all of us, maybe in the form of anxiety. Tell me 3 things on your mind. To tell you 3 things on my mind is to tell you about end time animals. How we lose ourselves in infinite scroll. Lost lifetimes because noon is conceptual, no rhythms. Loss is why casinos have no clocks and windows. Time's never up in isolation. Whale speak sounds like a monastic chant and a morning song. And if whales are mourning, who soothes them? That the lantern nymphs are eating fruit trees, grapevines, and who will ready Jesus's wine on the altar come Armageddon? Will nobody be forgiven in a dry land? Sober sinners, the lot of us. Animals act a straight fool during apocalypse. Rhinos run up and down their devegetated plain, laminated ferns and extruded wood waste inside zoo pens next to the hippos who are trying to unsuccessfully drown themselves. They too thick-skinned, they too effective at float, they too able to survive. But the 4 horsemen surely coming soon as they wrangle the sick wheat water. Any moment now, you'll see God waiting to unleash, she, he, they waiting to unleash, waiting on that one animal to do one more goddamn thing to some animal who has had it up to waiting. A strange man asked me to take the red out of my voice, calm down so you don't come off unhinged, waiting. A white lady poet says, good, you have 4 kids, you can spare one, waiting. I can't spare one, waiting. I have none to spare, waiting. I'm cash poor when it comes to birth. The hand in my pocket is full of 7 trumpets, and I'm waiting like a time bomb on a wombless sill. And this last one is called On Making an Essential Nigga, which is basically about the commodification of Blackness, essentializing Blackness. Making an essential nigga for the gatekeepers. Take at least 2 of any of these niggas. Niggas ain't got shit, nigga think they ain't shit, nigga hands down the pants, nigga circle jerk, eye jizz, nigga jeans slung low, nigga Tommy Hilfiger, nigga look at this label, nigga pop this collar, nigga bespoke ass, nigga pull that resume, nigga crude up ass, nigga ain't no nigga hot as me, nigga what you know about that, nigga rent a center subsidized, nigga no house, no equity, nigga fuck boy I love pussy, nigga just the tip, nigga bitch mine now, nigga ham hot pock liquor, nigga black lacquer bedroom, nigga grease that scalp, nigga velvet wallpaper, nigga
Don't talk about my mama, nigga. Ain't I a pretty nigga? Wave cap, board brush, nigga. They invited and I went, nigga. Sucking pink nipples, nigga. Riding peach dick, nigga. White ice, best cold, nigga. Michelle Pfeiffer ass, nigga. White savior, saver, sinner, nigga. Massa, show good to me, nigga. Milk toast, nigga. Look at my fat pockets, nigga. Weren't supposed to be nothing, nigga. They made me great, nigga. On the map, nigga. Can't read maps, nigga. GPS work just fine, nigga. Follow it to the grave, nigga. They buying you out, nigga. 30 in a crown now, nigga. Captain sunk, can't swim, nigga. Don't make no waves, nigga. Sharks worse than whips, nigga. Cotton gin boom, nigga. Wait for the gavel, nigga. Going once, going twice, nigga. Sold to the highest bidder, nigga. They don't even like you, nigga. Much less need you, nigga. Ampersand and asterisk, nigga. More where you came from, nigga. Spade, hoe, and dibber, nigga. It's never about you, nigga. About what you signal, nigga. Green, not black, nigga. White hot spotlight, nigga. Look at the parade, nigga. Helium strings and mylar, nigga. Lip sync platform, nigga. They love niggas like you, nigga. Floats in music, nigga. Cheer and Colt 45, nigga. Free Pomo ass, nigga. Please, sir, call me nigga, nigga. That's how they like their niggas. Hands where they can see a nigga. Soapbox built by other niggas, nigga. Standing on a trapdoor, nigga. If not me, then who, nigga? Somebody gotta get it, nigga. Now you see me, nigga. Now you won't, nigga. Magic glitter dust, nigga. What's your name, nigga? Should I know you, nigga? Aren't you that other nigger, nigga? You look just like that other nigger, nigga. Don't nobody know you, nigga. They revision history, nigga. Nobody told you, nigga. Use a rip page, nigga. Use a footnote, nigga. Use a if then, nigga. If that, nigga. If that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Actually, can really fast, if you all would like to unmute your microphone, so we hear a round of applause. We're here. Let our poets actually hear a round of applause. But we missed that. We need to have that, you know, now, especially we have to do everything so digitally. Thank you all both. Thank you all both so much, Ladan and Airea. I appreciate it. Oh my God. Shoot. Woo, shoot, ma. Shoot. Oh, goodness gracious. All right. Let me have a little second. I'm supposed to ask some questions and, you know, have a conversation. I'm supposed to do that after I'm trying to process with all y'all too. Hold on. All right. So pretty much I'm gonna have our visiting writers respond to. There's a couple of things I'm interested in asking them. For folks in the audience, if you would like to ask our writers a question, please feel free to post in the chat. Murray is going to be kind of flagging the questions down, and we will make sure that our writers respond to them if we get a chance for everyone's questions. What I want to start kind of asking and thinking the both of you about the modes of your poetry. Thinking about Ladan in Exiles of Eden, you've really taken this exegetical mode, right? Interpreting and reinterpreting and kind of revising how we think about even like, you know, the original Adam and Eve story, right? Also thinking how you incorporate, you know, these narrative modes to do so, to kind of unpack, deconstruct, and reorient our considerations of what it means to be gendered, right? And especially with the kind of the imposing of a kind of a biblical or religious kind of ideology in response to that. And then D, thinking about the anti-confessional modes that you're presenting in Simulacra, and then also the performative sonic modes that we even heard today. I'm curious to know how you feel like just in your process right now on your own individual poetic journeys, as you have these relationships and you're kind of working through these wheelhouses of modes. Where do you feel you're at in your I guess your attempts, right? Your attempt to work in these modes and your attempt to subvert some of the histories, the ideologies, the constructions, right, of our society. And what modes are you more interested in or kind of like being pulled to or drawn to currently? Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
All right, I'm sitting like, I told you, I was like, I ain't trying to sound dumb. Okay, so I know y'all so smart. I'm too smart.
Ladan, do you want to go first?
No.
Okay.
I'm just listening. I just got so into the vibe of listening. I can think for a second. I'll respond, but just thinking.
I think where I am right now is I'm really engaged with historical texts in the Black radical tradition. And I think that I was or am constantly influenced, like the guiding text for me right now is Zong. I think about how M. Norbese did what M. Norbese does, and it's just, how do you make something that feels as if it has duende from a flat historical text? You know, how do you give spirit to something that is inanimate in every sense of the word? And I'm really interested in that, and thinking about how to bring fullness into the work. You know, not only, and interestingly enough, not a fullness that's necessarily always informed by your own experiences. I think that we can get caught up in, too caught up in ourselves if we're only writing into our own experiences, but kind of thinking more deeply and more critically about globally about different voices and different stories, because a voice is a story. That's really what it is. And so, you know, and as I think about that, I think that I consider a lot about the lack of representation, flatness of being, and I'm just not into it. Like, I really want to dimensionalize what it is to be in this embodiment. And to be thinking about disparate things at every turn, you know, to like, what is that kind of, I think it's influenced by my interest in dialectics and kind of this idea of oppositional forces and rhythms and how they play with each other. And that's really how I think. And so writing into how I think, which forms my voice, which may work outside, may be inside of the confessional mode, it may be anti-confessional because it's subverting it to some degree. But it really is about pulling dimension into what can be perceived as solidly flat experience or text. For me right now, I mean, in two months, I might be on something different.
Right.
This is who I am as a person.
Thank you so much. That's a great response. Ladan, you feel it?
Yeah, thank you for that response, and thanks for this question, Jonah. I think definitely when I was writing, one of the most important things that I was considering about testimony and also the container of the testimony is how the recitation of it and how the order of images impacts the listener or the viewer, and how that teaches us, because that's how I've always understood scripture, is it's trying to get us to take the lessons into our own bodies and take it into our own voice and then recite it back. And that's definitely the case in the Islamic tradition. And I don't know, when I read Song of Songs or something, I'm like, I think it's also the same in other, in Christianity and Judaism, and almost every practice, whether it's under a religion or is agnostic or is maybe more bodily or rhythmic, also has some interest in a tone or some interest in a harmony, some interest in the breath. And so those are all things that I was considering less than maybe like recognizable form in like contemporary American poetry, but more so what does it mean to declare something and then to have that echoed back to you? And then even more importantly than that, how is it transformed by not only the listener, but the fellow reciter? And how does that interpretation change the way that I'm then going to go about future work? And so one thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently is the origins of blues in the US, and how there is very likely, and I think you can hear it when you listen to music from Senegal and Guinea and Mali, the way of using certain tones that are almost like a hum or create a vibration on the roof of the mouth, and a way of transitioning to notes and kind of extending the breath that would have been in certain recitation traditions that are undeniably Black. and are very specific to a region, but at this point now have spread all around the world. And so what does that mean about how we understand melancholy? That it's not something that just subsumes or like crashes onto you, but it's something that can be changed, muted, transformed, added to a harmony, could be even a site for flourishing, because the thing that is inside you that wants the hum, the thing that's inside of you that wants to expel is always there, regardless of the pressure that you're under. And so that's what I've been learning listening to some of these like early recordings, and some are quite terrible how they've been, you know, obtained, like just like recording some genius artist that was like part of a chain gang or something, or somebody that was just like working in a field. And so they would record some of the call and response. And sometimes, unfortunately, that's the only record of that time that we have. And so, well, if I'm thinking about that, and probably I'm thinking a little bit less about poetry in the form of poems, but you know, how do I think about it in terms of just other forms of writing or communication, or how I use my own breath, or what I allow into my own ears or into my own body? Because there's a lot of violence in the rhetoric and the attempts at erasure of people's just like sovereignty and belief in reality. I mean, I think that's something we're seeing in very real time and have been seeing in this administration. It's like, you didn't see that thing. That's not what's happening. This is what's happening. And how damaging and destructive that is, not only for the individual, but for the republic. And I think it'll be hard for us to see the consequences of that, all of the consequences of that now, because it's not, it's just, you know, like a political tool or just, you know, violent goofiness, but it's also not only itself a storytelling tool, but it's also an anti-storytelling tool. And so that's weird, and very devilish, and devilish in the sense of the discourse that doesn't go anywhere and it doesn't do anything, and it just wants chaos and it wants to confuse and it wants to obfuscate, but it's pretending to be something else. And so those are probably all things that I'm thinking about, but have, you know, taken some time to just think about other things like documentaries or photos, or just looking at other people's work, especially young people. Just like the main thing probably now.
Yeah, those are like two beautiful responses. Like, you know, thank you for being so generous and with those answers. I truly, you know, I was hoping like the question wouldn't be too, too vague actually myself. But it actually brings me to this next thing I wanted to talk to you both about, because, you know, I was kind of reading a certain thread that kind of started to come up to me. I kind of still trying to figure out how to even pose this question, right? And I think it does have something to do with the way you are both able to enter into certain arenas, into certain contexts, historical contexts, natural contexts, embodied contexts, as far as, you know, how one's embodied knowledges has already been, you know, informed by the racialized and the gendered, the kind of purviews or the perceptions of, you know, sexual orientation or sexuality itself. But there seems to be a little common thread that I saw coming up that I think is really just kind of getting to like the very basic element of who we are as people. And so what I'm discovering, both like kind of independently and intertextually with your work, it considers what I'm just going to refer to as like kind of the biological nature of either the speaker or the speaker's subject. Thinking of the behavior and speech as a type of genetic impulse, a thing that is inherited, both behavior and speech, you know, kind of thinking of it as an inherited, embodied material. It almost seems like in hormone itself. And also at the same time, how these social strictures are formed by an organism's phenotype, right? They're just their phenotypic display, how they look. The work always draws me back to this, how can I say, like a social science and a natural science that is getting deconstructed and reconstructed at once. And I'm just looking at thinking like Ladan in your poem, Sympathy for Eve, not to read these quips to out of context, but really kind of this ventriloquized voice of Eve that we were presented to by the speaker, where we imagine Eve saying, right, we are not a biological imperative. We are joined by the impulse of story. And then with you, Airea, I'm thinking of in Rebel Opera, the line where the mother kind of, speaking in response to the daughter in regard to the father's addiction. We inherit the cause, not the illness. All right. And then even thinking in Pius, we think, and who am I not to answer my inheritable call? And so I'm wondering, how these modes, how the narrative and lyric in your works, if you thinking, how do you see specifically what does narrative do? What does lyric do that can enter into these spaces and find that through line between the biological and the social? I don't know. I'm still kind of working through this. Does this make sense where I'm kind of getting at? I'm still working through this kind of thread still, right? Which I wonder why I wanted to bring it up in conversation. But how, kind of, how much of, this natural science seems to inform or kind of even cause a form of resistance to it, right? And is there a way that the work resists a natural science, or is it trying to resist the social idea that is, you're right, kind of wrongfully gleaned from natural science, right? Thinking of how, brain, right? It was like black brains are smaller, right? That was science in a way, right? We had to undo that narrative. The work seems to kind of undo these narratives of science and social science at the same time. Is this making sense? I'm like, I'm like really, yeah, okay. Because I'm really just, I'm still tackling with this. So I'm thinking, can you all say a little bit about how you are thinking through, issues of genes, phenotypes, genotypes, things like that, and how narrative and lyric can enter or override the gene, override the hormone, or are actual byproducts of it.
Mhm.
I was, that's obviously like very evil and beyond dubious non-science what you mentioned, but I laugh because I can just like look at this big brown egg for it. I'm like, there's gotta be some brain in here. This shiny egg of mine. I don't know what y'all are on. Anyway, yeah, so I think, there's a lot that's really interesting in that, and I think I understand the question. I hope I aspire to understand your question, Jonah. I think so much of, just in my experience of Blackness, is in resistance to the external, but but so much of it is also a yearning for the internal, and to just kind of like calibrate and to hold on to one's orientation, which is regularly abused and disoriented by this like attempt at reality that we have to live in the social structures, the political structures, and not only that, but the emotional ones, and all the after images of terrible things that have happened all over the diaspora, and the ghosts that are certainly there, and the broken songs and the traditions that many have tried to interrupt, and what does that mean then? And so when I'm thinking about, you asked about lyric and narrative, so I mean, I think especially as someone that's not writing in like very specific or known in forms that are maybe like known here, or that maybe won't automatically make sense to some readers, but I'm often thinking about the relationship between desire and pressure. And I'm just thinking about that just in life, and how those don't get to be just like parallel lines, or it's very often that the desire is trying to outrun the pressure, and very often that the pressure outruns desire, and is very violently intersects with desire, and all the ways, like what does that have to do with interruption and obstruction? And even if the physical self or the social self is limited, the dreaming self and the yearning self, it can't be, I don't think, actually. I mean, I think it looks like it can be, but I don't know that that a human being is capable of doing that. And so when I think about than what the lyric has to do, in the sense of what the breath has to do and what kind of music I would like a reader to experience. I'm thinking a lot about endurance and how hard to push a line or an idea or an image, and to not be afraid of its density, and to expect the reader to know that they have to do some work, and not only some work, but have to do some returning, and hope too that we will have to do some growing together, so that, you know, if you return to the book 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 50 years from now, that I would hope that it's a different experience each time, because you know, nothing, I don't think I've written anything to just kind of like be skimmed or to just be like gobbled up, you know, or just easy to pick apart in that sense. And so all of that, I mean, I think for me, it has to do with the biological, because it has to do with this larger conversation of resistance, but also yearning, and the melancholy that that yearning produces, which is just a part of being human, wanting to know each other and wanting to know oneself. But like, the difference is, for so many Black people, it's like, well, they're saying I don't have a self. And they're saying that I'm a figment of my own imagination, that my selfhood, my sovereignty, my personhood, my humanity, my beauty, my goodness, my brightness, my greenness, something in that is unreal. And that does give, I think, a lot more room for images to leap, and for more, I think someone's asking a question also about imagination. Most images, for example, like would have just come from things I've actually seen, but the connective tissue between those images and what it is that makes a metaphor for me is almost always informed by like the tempo of that internal lyric, or maybe an external one that I'm trying to capture, which is always in relationship with that tension. It's like looking at desire, looking at pressure. And that's the only way that I've known to write stories and to even think about plot, right? If we're talking about narrative, it's like, what does the character want? And what's in the, you know, that very basic thing that, you know, it's like day one in fiction classes or something. And like, what's in the way of what, you know, the character wants.
I strongly agree with what Ladan has forwarded. I think for me, lyric and narrative, well, I go back to the biological. I think the biological for me means an imprinting, right? So if you're thinking about an image, you think about, I'll go back to the idea of the palimpsest. So you have one image that's imprinted over another image. And I kind of believe that that's how identity is formed. It's like a series of different imprints. And to the degree that the base is like the biological basis, the biology is the foundation. So you're building on some foundation. In many instances, that foundation is flawed, that foundation is cracked, that foundation is steady and solid. So it just tends to depend on what your experiences are. But as it relates to language, it obviously it's more of a, language is more of a social skill. It's a part of our culture that is inherited as any other thing would be inherited. And I have inherited the sounds and the rhythms and the tempos of the language around me. My grandmother was from deep South Alabama, Pike County, Alabama. They didn't even have a town name, they were a county. And I remember hearing the rhythms of her speech and thinking that her lilts, even as a child, I thought that her lilts were very sonorous to me, like they were pleasing to me and they made me feel very comfortable and sensibly at home under her voice, under the sound of her voice. And I think about voices in that way. When I first started writing poems, I was actually writing a bunch of persona poems. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was gifted with the ability to embody an experience through a language. I could hear something and it would remind me of something else, and then I could enact that on the page. But I think mostly what the lyric and the narrative does for all of us as writers is that it gives us an opportunity to present nuance. Since my prosodic structures are not going to be like, oh, here is a perfect iambic hexameter, you know, like I'm not engaging the lyric in the way of the rhythmic lyrics that we've inherited from what we know of prosody. I'm inheriting it from what I've heard in my household, in my larger family, in the context of the communities in which I've lived. And so I want to bring those to fore. But nevertheless, what I think it offers is an opportunity to make a single embodiment complex, which is what we all are. You know, we're not monolithic creatures. We all are very complex. We have different ideas about things. We have ideas that oppose one another. And so how do you make those oppositions felt? You make those oppositions felt through the language that you use. You make those oppositions felt through the rhythms that you employ. And so the lyric becomes very helpful as it relates to viscerality. But the narrative gives us the structure by which to tell the story. It's like the narratological structure, the logic of the narrative gives us the foundation. The lyric is the boat, you know, it's the boat that carries us across, you know, it's like the boat that carries us across the sea. And yeah, I'm grateful to be able to present complexity and to be able to hold these opposing ideals, you know, at the same time, or ideas at the same time. I'm not the kind that is particularly dogmatic because my opinions change depending on the day, you know, and that's just a part of my makeup. That's just how I am. And so how do I show that? And I show that through the diversity of the lyric, diversity of narrative, bringing narratives to fore that are interesting to me as a writer, and I hope interesting to readers. And I don't
Those are
know.
great answers. Oh my God, y'all, because really, I was struggling to kind of get to the question, right, right. But oh, that was really, really great answers and responses. I think were really helpful as far as situating the thread that I'm reading, right, and thinking about what is it that you all are both deploying lyrically and narratively that is kind of pulling off the subversion. Right, and so I really appreciate those answers. I want to take just a couple questions from the audience really fast. So I have Lila, have you ever had to give up on a piece of work? Like, has a poem or story ever given you such a hard time that you had to turn away from it? And do you even believe in letting a piece of work go?
I mean, I'm a very vicious cutter, so when it comes to my own work and to poems, so I do think that, yeah, sometimes something does need to be let go. I think maybe it's more important to ask myself why it's not working and also why I'm wanting to hold on to it. Sometimes there's information there because maybe you can't make that piece work, but you can push yourself as a writer, you can push yourself as a thinker or as a reader. And so the exercise is always worthwhile. Like, it's not a waste because it doesn't become like a poem, or this stanza doesn't fit in this specific poem. And then sometimes I've had to also check myself in terms of form, like, this is poetry and I think it needs to be in the container of a poem, but actually maybe it's supposed to be an essay or a short story or something that's collaborative, that's set to music, or maybe I want to interpret this in film or something like that. And so that's also something that's worthwhile to consider if there's some arbitrary limitation. But yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, it seems like a good exercise, like when we're thoughtful about it, to be able to let anything go, to change our ideas about maybe like possession and control, and to let art, let people, let experiences tell us what they need, you know, and be like, it's hard to have the humility to obey that, I think, but you know, it's worth it to try, even if you fail.
I agree with that. I think I have personally thrown out an entire manuscript. I burned it in a fit of rage and disappointment with myself in a fire. It wasn't, I didn't create a bonfire. It was in the fireplace.
Yeah.
The fireplace was already going, I put it in there. So I did that, and it feels like, as I look back at it retrospectively, it was all ego. You know, it was me thinking that these weren't poems that I wanted to write, that weren't representative of me, but everything that you write in some way represents yourself. So you have to be the adjudicator to figure out, okay, is this the right representation for where I am right now? And that just comes with editing. So my advice, I later found snippets of that manuscript on an old drive, and I was really thankful for that, because I went back to the poems and I was like, all is not lost. There's something here. You can pluck something, you know, it's a process I call harvesting lines. A lot of times a poem fails, but the lines are working, you know, and so you can harvest a line, and you might create something sometime down the road that's different than what you thought you were going to create. And so you give yourself, you know, you work up a treasure house of these lines that you can come back to later, or maybe they might incite you to write something longer. Or maybe they fit perfectly in this new thing that you've been writing. So I caution against throwing almost anything out. I try and keep these random thoughts in a journal. Sometimes if I get tired of doing that, I will print out old poems that I think are lost, poems that I don't like, and I'll actually harvest the line with with scissors and create a collage, so that I know that I can come back to those later. You know, if I ever get stuck, I'll just come back to the collage and see what I can pluck out. So you know, everything that you think isn't working isn't not working, is what I'm saying. If you think it's not working, just give it some time. Like, temperance is our friend in this game. Giving yourself time, being patient with yourself, showing yourself compassion. That may have been where you were then, you'll be someplace different later. And being compassionate towards your present self and your future self. So I would caution against throwing things away.
Thank you so
Although
much.
I
All
have.
right, good. Yeah, those are great responses. I'm sitting here, I'm like, yeah, I should probably find that little notebook. But anyway, but yeah, thank you all so much. Question from Phil. What's up, Phil? What's up, Phil in here? Question: with what misguides us being the constant repetition of image and language, i.e., you're muted through Zoom calls, meetings, etc. How has this changed the way you think about repetition in your own work? Its urgency and effect?
I don't know if the contemporary times have really changed the way I think about repetition. I have always kind of held to the philosopher Heraclitus, where he says that you can't step into the same river twice. And so when there's a return, which is what I call repetition, when there's a return, it returns to you differently. It returns to you with less urgency, or with more urgency, or with more feeling, or with less, with a flatness. I'm interested in the way that things return to you, and not everything is meant to return to you. So it's like finding themes, images, words that are meant to come back to you. It's like almost like a reflection in the mirror, like standing between two mirrors, you know, the reflection of the first mirror and the reflection behind you. You know, it's like the reflection is returning on itself. And so I kind of think of that with images. I think of that with repetition and words and returns. Everything that is meant to return returns differently. It never comes back the same way. It's like it's as if our image itself fades. It doesn't stay the same. You know, we age. And so you look at yourself in the mirror when you're 20, and then when you're 48, you're like, some things have shifted. But it's the same person. And so I think about that as it relates to return. Yeah.
Hey, Phil. Yeah, I do think that there's it adds up to maybe some try at a restraint. Or I think that part of what is difficult about things like meetings and like different boxes and the different expected language that sometimes we're so like eager to take on, so that we're all on the same page and that we all understand each other and things are just working in a system and trying to make order out of the very obvious disorder that is around us. I'm really uncomfortable with that anxiety that I think often manifests in Zoom, but I mean, it's an anxiety that would have been there anyway, just in a different form. So I don't know how much it's changed the way that I think about repetition in my own work, but I do think that something in that staccato, something in that directive, something in that like directive that everybody is supposed to understand and obey is definitely interesting and worthwhile in pursuing. I don't know how I would want to use it myself, but my reaction to it is definitely to just think more about like grand spaces and magic and things that are very different than like a video meeting probably. So I guess that is a reaction. So I
Thank
will
y'all.
be thinking about that.
Thank you so much. So there are like way more questions I think we have time for. These really good questions, a lot of great questions. I'm going to copy and paste them and try to get them in some form. There's a question that came up though. I think I would like to see if we can kind of finish up on from Elliot Lawrence. Poetry and other forms of published writing often is able to resist and confront capitalistic ideas and bring forth underrepresented voices while also existing within the same organization that it opposes. Example, needing to sell books that have content that calls out capitalism in order to spread the word, and if applicable, what has your experience been bringing underrepresented voices or confrontational ideas in today's writing community? Has it been difficult getting these ideas and voices heard and published? Or have you found that the community has a demand for unique pieces? So yeah, I thought that might have been a pretty decent question. I don't know, that might be kind of heavy.
I think it's an excellent question. It's a question of how do you operate in a system in which you're trying to resist? And I think it's what we're all confronted with right now, just on a political, socio-political scale. How do you exist inside of a system that you want to strike out against? And I kind of like, I don't ever feel like I've actually not been able to get something. I mean, there's a couple, that Essential Nigga poem is not a poem that's easy to get published, but it's not that I've been approached to publish it. I've just been hesitant to publish it because I feel like it's a poem that doesn't necessarily want to exist under the system that I'm confronting, if that makes sense. Like, I'd rather just like get it out through word of mouth or put it up on social media and have it exist in the public domain without having to go through publishing channels. So there's some times where I do that with work, and I often do that with work. I don't publish everything that I write. I don't feel the need to, because I think a lot of times some stuff that I write needs to be read inside of a collection. It needs to be read in the context of other things. So, I mean, that's one of the ways that I get around it, is to like know thyself. I know how my work best works, and I resist and I speak out when it's necessary to resist and speak out, which is often actually. And I'm not very much afraid of retaliation in any real way. I mean, what you gonna retaliate against? It's poetry. I mean, it's like, we're not making no money doing this. I don't know what you're gonna take away. So, you know, I think about it in that way. It's like, I'm free. I don't have the same strictures that strict capitalism imposes on some arts. It's really hard in visual arts. It's really hard sometimes in fiction when you have those 7-digit deals looming, and you take that out of the equation, and I think you can get an honest work, honestly. Like, you can be more honest. There's a lot less, there's a lot at risk, but there's a lot less at risk, I think. Also, I really highly suggest reading The New American Revolution by Grace Lee Boggs. She really contextualizes revolution in a way in which is fascinating and doable. Like, you feel like it's actionable. Like, oh, I can be a revolutionary right where I stand right now by doing these small things. And so, The New American Revolution by Grace Lee Boggs.
I think this is a great question, and there are some things that you know, I understand that I'm coming at this from a different angle and want to be careful with nuance, especially as a cisgender woman, and like I think that there are some passes sometimes, you know, that we get, like sometimes based on who you know or where you went to school or your appearance or something, that I'm very well aware that you know, besides doing the work and, you know, maybe people reading you in a positive way, that there are other things that allow for that permissiveness. Not that you don't deserve to be in the room, but I think that that's a valid and important thing to think about, that there is rejection, and there is like a will to not represent, but there's sometimes also a will to invite and a will to like make you like some kind of representative or poster child for some idea or some group of people. And in contemporary poetry and probably most art, like to be the only one, like, you know, I think that that would be, you know, like to be the only person of this background who has gotten this thing or whatever. But I mean, I would answer, and sorry, there's like some guys doing some very dramatic thing like right outside in the street. So I don't know if that noise is impacting my voice. But I'll try to answer from a bit of a different angle, just in the sense that, because I think Airea has covered a lot already, but from the sense of like we can be in the system, but how do we share information? How do we help each other negotiate better contracts? How do we help each other, you know, like win fellowships? And just like if we have to be subject to these systems, how do we help each other navigate them? Like what I want may not be the same as what a friend wants. Like I have definitely have some friends that it's like, well, for my career path, I feel like I need to win. I have to do certain things. And so it's like, okay, if that's what's happening, how can we be careful about who we write recommendation letters for? How can we be careful about who we give second and third chances to with the recognition? Like, for example, I know that many young African poets, like sometimes there has to be, even though people are very motivated, have been failed so many times and have been told so many times that they can't do something, that there's maybe a little bit of extra follow-up that's needed, a little bit of extra encouragement, so that everything is submitted and so that they can move forward in their paths, and just to be sensitive to that. And then also in terms of introducing other underrepresented voices. So it's like, how can I go out of my way to make sure that there are a lot of different kinds of writers of different backgrounds, different gender representations, that the people who ask me for help, I take that as seriously as I can. And if I understand that there's some lag in, you know, Somali American poetry in some of the MFAs, or that fiction writers on the US side are not being given enough of a chance, how can I use my network? How can I use the things that I know, the secrets that I know, the whisper networks that I'm in? How can I use my voice to put forward like some kind of negotiation for a better contract, better marketing, better something that will inevitably positively impact someone who's coming after me, or they'll at least all have the knowledge so that they can negotiate better together. And so, you know, big supporter of unions, obviously, and people being really mindful of our labor and the power of our labor, and that our worthiness cannot be determined, right, by these institutions. We have to know that we're already worthy, and, you know, be ready to help each other. And there's so many people in this room, that people, you know, like Jonah, that's true for Jonah, that's true for Airea, that's definitely true for Philip Williams, who is just like the, you know, it has helped people tremendously, quite quietly, like we'll probably never admit to that. And so how do we take that kind of community care and be mindful about who may be a little bit outside of these systems, a little bit outside of these institutions, whether that's due to you know, some things having to do with identity or age or educational background or the forms that they're writing in or their interdisciplinary nature of their work. How can we really push so that the whole field has to move forward? So that, because that has been like the disappointments that I've had over the last 10 years, it's really, really critical for me that the people who are coming now and coming behind me don't have those same disappointments. And that's probably the thing that has made the most meaning for me in this poetry community, is to already see people coming into a like slightly better situation. that they're making slightly better deals for themselves than were available to me, and they're sharing that information with each other, and they're standing up for themselves with more courage. And that's probably, I mean, I think the best that we can do for each other as well.
Whew. Oh, thank you all both so much. That was, I mean, just beautiful, beautiful answers. You know, inspirational answers, revolutionary answers. And just the reading again, thank you all so much, and for the dialogue and for the kinship and the friendship, and again, just giving so much of yourselves again. I just want to thank you all for coming. Thank you to the writers. I'm sorry, I'm still over here like, wow, I'm so happy that we got to do this. Wow, this has been a great event. Thank you all so much again. I just can't thank you everybody enough. Please, can you all want to unmute and give another round of applause to our visiting writers again, who's just been so gracious with their time and energy today. Yeah, unmute those things and clap it up. Damn. Good, thank you all so much. Thank you all so much. I was gonna play some tunes, but I think I messed up my system. Oh yeah, no. Here we go. Here we go. We're gonna go crazy a little bit before we get up out of here. He's forever, and it's a mighty long time. But
I'm here to tell you.
Something else. Thank y'all again so much. Hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Hope you all enjoyed the event. Take care. Sun, day, or nights. I'm gonna be here partying. If y'all want to party a little bit, you know, let's let this one go down. After everything will be all right. Baby, hey, it's like out in the after world. It's just like you're your own. Hey, if the elevator tries to bring you down, go crazy. All right, thanks, Albert. So look at all the love. Wow. Make sure y'all check the chat. Look at all the love everybody was posting in the chat. If y'all going to check it out. There's some beautiful. I'm gonna copy and paste them really fast too. There's really, really nice messages. All right. See y'all. Oh no, let's go. See y'all, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Jonah. Thank you, Airea.
Thank you, Ladan. Thank you, Jonah.
Bye-bye. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank y'all very much.
Thanks, Murray. Thanks, Karen.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
you
Nice to meet
guys.
you all. That was wonderful reading. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.